Aging is often treated as an unavoidable consequence of time. We mark it with birthdays, gray hair, and the slow accumulation of aches we're told to accept as normal. But biology tells a very different story. Your body does not age according to the calendar. It ages according to what happens inside your cells, moment by moment, signal by signal. Two people can share the same chronological age and yet live in completely different biological realities. One may feel sharp, energized, and resilient. The other feels drained, foggy, inflamed, and decades older than they should. The reason lies in biological age, not the number printed on your ID. Biological age reflects the conditioned cells, how efficiently they produce energy, repair damage, and communicate with one another. When these processes slow down, aging accelerates, regardless of how young you technically are. This is why some people in their 30s already experience chronic fatigue, poor sleep, stubborn inflammation, and declining mental clarity, while others in their 60s move with vitality and focus. What makes this especially unsettling is that cellular aging often begins long before we notice visible symptoms. Long before wrinkles appear or strength declines, microscopic damage is quietly accumulating. DNA strands suffer small breaks. Mitochondria, the energy generators of your cells, become less efficient. Protective structures that preserve cellular integrity gradually weaken. By the time the body sends clear warning signs, the process has often been unfolding for years. Modern life accelerates this silent breakdown in ways previous generations never faced. Constant stress keeps the nervous system locked in survival mode. Processed foods flood cells with inflammatory signals. Artificial light disrupts natural rhythms that guide repair and regeneration. Over time, the body stops prioritizing renewal and shifts into a state of mere maintenance, doing just enough to survive, not to thrive. Yet history reveals something profoundly important. Aging has not always progressed this way. Certain populations, living under very different conditions and guided by different relationships with food and nature, appeared to age more slowly, more gracefully. Their vitality did not come from fighting time, but from supporting the body's innate ability to renew itself. This raises a critical question. What if aging is not simply about getting older, but about losing access to the biological signals that keep cells functioning as they were designed to? And what if some of those signals have been hiding in plain sight all along? To understand why the body seems to age so aggressively today, we have to look beyond genetics and focus on the environment we place ourselves in every single day. Your cells are not passive passengers. They constantly listen and respond to chemical, hormonal, and electrical signals. When those signals are hostile, confusing, or overwhelming, cells shift into a defensive state. Repair slows, energy production drops, survival becomes the priority. Chronic stress is one of the most damaging signals of all. When stress hormones remain elevated for long periods, they directly interfere with cellular repair mechanisms. Cortisol, meant to be a short-term survival tool, becomes a corrosive force when it never turns off. Over time, it accelerates DNA damage, weakens immune signaling, and shortens the protective buffers that help cells divide safely. The body is not breaking down by accident. It is responding exactly as it was programmed to under constant threat. Food plays an equally destructive role when it lacks real biological intelligence. Highly processed meals may provide calories, but they carry little information for cellular repair. Instead, they trigger low-grade inflammation that quietly spreads through tissues and organs. This inflammation doesn't feel dramatic at first. It shows up as stiffness, brain fog, unstable energy, and difficulty recovering from effort. Inside the body, however, it creates a biochemical environment where cells age faster simply to cope. Modern exposure doesn't stop there. Polluted air, heavy metals, pesticides, and persistent toxins place an oxidative burden on the body that previous generations never faced. Free radicals accumulate faster than the body can neutralize them, attacking cell membranes, proteins, and genetic material. At the same time, artificial light and irregular schedules disrupt circadian rhythms that once told the body exactly when to repair, cleanse, and regenerate. Without those rhythms, the cellular maintenance window shrinks or disappears entirely. The result is not sudden collapse, but gradual biological erosion. Mitochondria produce less energy, forcing cells to operate in power-saving mode. Communication between cells becomes inefficient. Repair systems fall behind. What we experience as getting older is often the final stage of a long process that began with years of subtle cellular stress. Aging, in this context, is not an enemy. It is a symptom. And symptoms, by definition, point to a deeper imbalance that can be addressed once it is clearly understood. For a long time, aging was viewed as a one-way descent, a gradual but irreversible decline written into our biology. Recent discoveries have begun to dismantle that assumption. Scientists now understand that aging is not governed by a single clock, but by a network of cellular processes that can slow down, speed up, or partially recover depending on the signals they receive. In other words, aging is not just about damage accumulating, it is about how well the body responds to that damage. At the center of this understanding is the idea that cells are equipped with sophisticated repair systems. They can identify breaks in DNA, recycle damaged components, and even replace worn-out mitochondria with new, more efficient ones. These systems do not disappear with age. They become underused or suppressed when the body is overwhelmed by stress, inflammation, and metabolic chaos. When the right conditions are restored, many of these mechanisms can re-engage. One of the most revealing insights from modern research is that certain biological signals tell cells when to repair and when to conserve energy. Nutrient quality, antioxidant availability, and metabolic cues all influence whether a cell invests resources in renewal or simply tries to survive. This explains why some lifestyle interventions, such as periods of fasting, improved sleep patterns, or exposure to specific plant compounds, can produce measurable improvements in markers associated with biological aging. Rather than acting as simple shields, many natural compounds function as messengers. They activate pathways linked to longevity, stress resistance, and mitochondrial efficiency. When these pathways are switched on, cells behave more like they did in earlier decades. Energy production improves, inflammation subsides, and repair processes regain momentum. Importantly, this does not mean turning back time completely, but it does suggest that the trajectory of aging is far more flexible than once believed. What emerges from this research is a powerful reframing. Aging is not merely the result of time passing, but of lost communication within the body. Restore the signals that promote balance, and the body responds with resilience. This realization bridges the gap between ancient wisdom and modern science, setting the stage for understanding why certain traditional foods and practices may have supported vitality long before the language of molecular biology existed. Long before laboratories and clinical trials existed, human survival depended on close observation of the body and the natural world. Ancient healers did not measure biomarkers, but they recognized patterns. They saw which foods restored strength after illness, which plants sharpened the mind, and which practices helped elders remain active and clear well into old age. Aging was not treated as something to be fought aggressively, but as a process that could be guided, slowed, and softened through harmony with natural rhythms. Across different cultures, there was a shared understanding that food carried more than nourishment. It carried information. Certain ingredients were believed to strengthen what was often described as vital essence or life force, concepts that, while symbolic, closely resemble what modern science now recognizes as metabolic resilience and cellular efficiency. These foods were rarely consumed casually. They were taken with intention, often at specific times of day or seasons, and sometimes reserved for those in recovery or advanced age. Monastic communities, in particular, offer a revealing lens. Living away from excess and artificial stimulation, monks structured their lives around simplicity, consistency, and restoration. Their diets were modest but carefully chosen. Rather than eating frequently, they focused on foods that delivered concentrated biological value, meals aligned with daylight cycles, allowing the body to enter deep repair states during rest. This environment naturally supported the cellular processes that modern life disrupts. What stands out is that these traditions did not chase immortality. They aimed for clarity, steadiness, and sustained vitality. Longevity was a byproduct, not the goal. In this context, certain fruits and plants earned special status, not because they promised miracles, but because generations observed their ability to support recovery, vision, energy, and resilience over time. Today, With the benefit of modern science, we can begin to translate these observations into biological language and understand why some of these ancient choices were far more sophisticated than they first appeared. When modern research began examining these traditional foods more closely, one fruit repeatedly surfaced, not as a miracle cure, but as a biological outlier. Goji berries have been part of Asian dietary and healing traditions for centuries, yet their reputation has often been diluted by mass production and exaggerated marketing. Stripped of myth and hype, what remains is something far more interesting: a food with an unusually dense concentration of compounds that directly support cellular protection and repair. What makes goji berries distinctive is not a single nutrient, but their biochemical profile as a whole. They contain high levels of carotenoids, particularly zeaxanthin, which plays a critical role in protecting cells from oxidative stress, especially in tissues exposed to high metabolic demand like the eyes and brain. Alongside this are unique polysaccharides, complex sugars that act as biological communicators, influencing immune balance and supporting the body's natural repair responses. However, not all goji berries are created equal. Most commercial varieties are cultivated for sweetness, color, and shelf life rather than biological potency. In traditional use, the berries were valued precisely because they grew under harsh conditions. Environmental stress, thin soil, intense sunlight, and high altitude forced the plant to produce protective compounds for its own survival. Those same compounds are what make the fruit biologically valuable to humans. Seen through this lens, goji berries are not a shortcut to youth, nor are they effective in isolation. They are better understood as a signal, one that tells the body it is safe to shift out of constant defense mode and reallocate resources toward maintenance and renewal. When used intentionally, within a broader framework that supports cellular health, this humble fruit becomes less about chasing longevity and more about restoring the conditions in which the body remembers how to care for itself. To appreciate how this process unfolds inside the body, it helps to think of cellular aging not as a single failure, but as a cascade. When oxidative stress rises, cells divert energy away from long-term maintenance and toward immediate survival. Mitochondria slow down, DNA repair becomes less efficient, and inflammatory signals linger longer than they should. Over time, this cascade reshapes how the body functions at a fundamental level. Compounds found in nutrient-dense foods work by interrupting this cycle at multiple points. Antioxidants reduce the burden of free radicals, easing the constant pressure on cellular defenses. But their more important role lies in signaling. When cells detect certain plant-derived molecules, they interpret them as cues that resources are available and conditions are stable. This shifts internal priorities away from emergency response and back toward repair and optimization. Goji berries illustrate this layered effect well. Zeaxanthin and beta-carotene help stabilize cell membranes and protect sensitive tissues from oxidative damage. Vitamin C, bound naturally to bioflavonoids, becomes more readily absorbed and participates in collagen synthesis and immune regulation. Trace minerals such as selenium support mitochondrial enzymes, allowing energy production to become more efficient rather than strained. At the same time, specific polysaccharides influence gene expression related to resilience and recovery. Instead of forcing cells to work harder, they help cells work smarter, improving communication between systems that govern inflammation, immunity, and metabolism. This creates a compounding effect. Better energy availability supports repair, improved repair reduces inflammation, and lower inflammation further protects cellular structures. The result is not a sudden transformation, but a gradual rebalancing. Cells regain their ability to respond appropriately rather than react constantly. Over weeks, this internal environment becomes more stable, allowing the body to express traits we associate with youth: clarity, stamina, and adaptability. Not because time has been reversed, but because the biological conditions that accelerate aging have been gently corrected. One of the most overlooked aspects of nutritional support is not what is consumed, but how and when it is taken. The body does not absorb nutrients in a mechanical way. Absorption is deeply influenced by timing, nervous system state, and digestive readiness. When eating is rushed, distracted, or layered on top of constant stimulation, even the most potent foods lose much of their biological impact. Traditional practices understood this intuitively. Slow, mindful consumption was not about ritual for its own sake, but about creating the internal conditions that allow nutrients to signal effectively. Chewing thoroughly mixes food with saliva, which contains enzymes that begin breaking down compounds before they